All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Here's hoping that our live stream is up and rolling. Awesome. So, yesterday I talked about my latest program, the Wonder Woman Weekend, which is a completely virtual, like camp style retreat for women living with ADHD. And tonight I want to talk about why I think it's so important. It's like why um, I've created this, and maybe if this is you, I want to describe someone. If this is you, why maybe you should consider joining us on the Wonder Woman weekend. So, if this is you, listen up. There are 6 habits that can push you into overdrive, and not in a good way. The first, number one, imposter syndrome, and that's this sense of you're always trying to mirror the social behaviors around you. You probably got in trouble a lot as a young person for things that you did or you said, a little bit too loud, a little bit too, you know, um, intense, maybe interrupting people, and that it's not quite what is accepted. And so you've learned to watch around you, the social interactions, you've learned to mirror. And what happens then is that you feel like you're always sort of faking it, trying to put on a show. Um, it's like imposter syndrome, but like times 100. Um, Number two, impulsivity. Yeah. So your impulsivity just completely adds to your stress level. You probably overthink, you overshare, you might overspend, you make quick, rash decisions, and then find yourself having to explain to people around you why you decided that. And you might not even know it's so quick. Number three, those disorganized thoughts and habits. Like your organizational systems need organizational systems. I remember being completely obsessed with organization, and it's because I was desperate to find something that was going to work. But it literally feels like your brain has been tossed into a washing machine. No matter how you try, it's just jumbled, right? You might have low self-esteem and poor self-image, and it's like you've always suffered with this, feeling like your inner critic just dominates and makes you feel shame and makes you feel like you just can't do anything right, and that inner voice torments you, and it leads to this sense of just never quite being good enough, and also makes you really sensitive to criticism, like really sensitive to someone pointing out to you your flaws, because man, you are very well aware of them. In fact, your inner critic reminds you all the time. Number 5, time blindness. This is a big one. So it's like time just it slips away from you. It can go really, really fast. It can take a really, really long time. When you might overestimate how much time you have to do something, and suddenly you're rushing around trying to get to appointments, or you're late again. You seem to have trouble, judging how long something's going to take. And it's never quite exactly the same. Even a task that you've done a whole bunch of times can take a different amount of time depending on how distracted you got. So it's hard to judge how long that activity is going to take. On the other hand, if you are focused on something that is interesting to you, is exciting to you, like hours can pass in the blink of an eye, right? Like hours can go by because you're so focused, and you might not even notice that you haven't taken a break. Time just doesn't work quite the same way for you. And the last one, number 6, is you just feel like there's something different about you. Like you always feel a bit lost, a little bit chaotic. And sometimes you feel like a superhero. You do. But sometimes you just feel like that super failure, right? That you're never going to get to where you need to go. You're never going to actually achieve, and it really impacts you. If this is you, you're who I really wanted to make this weekend for. You're who I want to be. I want to be on your tribe. I want to be with you because I get it. And I feel like if it is you, just maybe take a look at the website. You can learn more on the website. You can click on the link, or look up www.mindstudio.ca and find out a little bit more about what this weekend is really about. Um, so for those of you just joining me, let me backtrack and let me introduce myself a little bit. Like, who is this crazy person anyway? My name is Michelle Tassa, and I am a professional educator. In fact, I've taught mostly overseas in international schools, but early on in my career, I found myself being drawn to those students who were challenged, those students who were struggling. And I worked in a lot of schools where there weren't a lot of resources, and we had to manage um, figuring out how to get kids to succeed no matter what their challenges were. In fact, I remember one of my early classrooms, I had a young man, and he had trouble sitting still. He had a lot of trouble sitting still, and he would try to drive his desk around the classroom. This is grade one. He would, yeah, even when we were sitting in our desks, he was struggling. And so I remember putting tape on the floor around him in a parking lot. So like, you got to park here during this time. We don't drive our desks around, but after that, then we had some more tape on the floor where he could like pace back and forth and have some movement, but just, try and stay out of the other students' areas. Like, finding ways to let kids be successful, and not feel like there's something wrong with them, and that's not something that all of us had, right? Um, so yeah, that experience working with kids, and over 25 years, it's been a lot of kids. I think I've learned how to find ways to adapt, and find ways to help kids excel. um, a few years ago, I opened my own studio, an art studio, and it was designed to let kids just create in a way where they didn't have to follow instructions. They could be the boss, right? And I was just going to support them. And what I found was the kids that were attracted to that, the kids who kept showing up time and time again, were the neurodiverse, the kids who struggle with the structure and the routines and the step by step of what other art classes might have been. And so I began to work with those kids, and then I began to work with their families too. And that's how I then moved into working with adults, coaching with adults, because it just made sense. Like, we're whether you're a child with ADHD, a teen with ADHD, or an adult with ADHD, there are some coping strategies that work universally, and there are real and challenges that impact us at those different stages. And so I've been working more recently with adults, and really noticing the difference that I can make. I also have a son who was diagnosed with ADHD at 5, and I advocated for him throughout his schooling, because I knew what he was struggling with, and knew that there were ways that we could adapt for him, that he didn't have to fit into the mold. And it's interesting that with all of this experience, with all of this understanding of ADHD and neurodiversity, I never once thought I had it. I was diagnosed with ADHD 3 years ago. And at first, it was a shock. And that was a short shock, because it just kind of went, oh, that explains so many things. It just explains so many things. Um, and yet, yeah, I hadn't seen it in myself. And very shortly after I was diagnosed, my daughter was diagnosed at 16. So all three of us in our family are neurodiverse. It means I have a lot of experience with it. Really, it's part of every waking moment, and it's part of my professional life, and it's just, it's become so significant to me. And I wish there was a place where I could have found a community. I wish that I'd known earlier my diagnosis. It would have changed a lot of things. And that's why I felt like compelled to create something, as I'm work right now with adults and teach workshops on mental health, and more people are being diagnosed with ADHD, particularly women later in life. And I'm just sort of amazed at how many are having this diagnosis happen it makes sense because we have been overlooked for so long. It makes sense, but it's not, it's difficult to be diagnosed this late in the game. There's a lot of challenges. And what I have found is that the things that I have suggested in classes have been so appreciated and received, and it seems like people are needing this. They're needing a place to find strategies. They're needing a place to find people who understand, who get it. And so yeah, I really wanted to begin to help more people. I was teaching a class recently on communication, and a lot of the skills and strategies that are appropriate for neurotypical people, they just don't, they're not quite the same. And so about 4 or 5 of the participants had already said to us that they were living with ADHD. And so I felt like I needed to include not only what is a typical experience of communication, how you can build your communication skills, but also things like you should be aware that you probably mimic people without realizing it, because that's part of masking. It's part of that imposter syndrome. And a number of people were like, I do that. I totally copy other people's accents. I didn't know that was related to ADHD. And I said, yeah, that's just what you're trying to do, is find what's appropriate. And so, but it can get you into trouble because you're suddenly moving into an accent, or you might be using words that that person always uses, and they might think that you are making fun of them, that you're mocking them, and you, like, unintentionally are just trying to match your language to their language. I mean, that's just something to be aware of, right? It's an important thing to be aware of, because it can lead to some deep misunderstandings. And while that tip was just small, it's just a tiny little tip, what I found was that in that class, people were just, it's like they lit up, like, oh, you do that too? And someone else said, I do that too. Okay. And it was this moment of like, oh, we're the same. I don't know how many times you feel like that, because for me, it's not very often. I don't often feel the same. In fact, most of the time, I feel really different. And if you've grown up with ADHD and didn't know, I think you probably have felt incredibly different. That's what I'm hoping this weekend is going to be. I'm hoping this weekend is going to be a place where people feel seen, where people feel acknowledged, and maybe begin to work on some of the shame and some of the self doubt and self criticism that I know has come through, growing up with a brain that just does not fit into the world as we know it, right? I think that women who have ADHD, and typically ones who have been recently diagnosed, they need support. You need support. This isn't easy, and so you need like a high level of support, because there's some grief involved here in what you've lost in not understanding yourself and people not understanding you. Maybe some pressure that has been placed on you, that if you'd just known why you were struggling, maybe you wouldn't have felt so, um, uh, I guess, less than is the best way. You might not have felt so undeserving and so unworthy, because there are reasons for the struggle, right? It's not that we're not lazy, we're not unintelligent, we're not unmotivated. And it feels like that sometimes, that we're getting that message from other people. And then we begin to take that on for ourselves. And so it's so important to have support. And then also, there are like a ton of things that we can do, a ton of coping strategies that we can put into place to make our lives better, more successful, calmer, more peaceful. Can we fix everything? No, there's still going to be chaos. I'm not guaranteeing anything that doesn't look like some level of chaos. But what I think I'm hoping to give and to share with you is that transformation that happens when you accept who you are, and learn to adapt, learn to cope, learn to make the world around you work for you, not against you, but mostly to accept who you are and really live in that. Um, you know, the good and the bad, the ugly, like just all of it. That's why I just really think that women with living with ADHD, particularly those of you who have just been diagnosed, you need a tribe, you need a sisterhood, and maybe this will be that one. If this sounds like you, sign up for the Wonder Woman retreat. It's going to be so much fun. It's $97, and that is for we've got 5 high touch workshops that are going to just transform how you think about ADHD, how you think about your own behaviors, your experiences, and I think let you leave with less weight, less, more like a lighter experience of the world, right? An understanding of how to move through the world a little bit differently, with more joy, with more peace. I also have 2 guest speakers I'm very excited about. And really I'm blessed to know them as people, and really excited that you're going to get to know them as well. And they both have some really important messages to share with us about living with ADHD, living with neurodiversity. And yeah, I'm really excited to introduce you to them as well. I do want to be clear. This is not a replacement for medical advice. I am not a medical doctor, and I can't diagnose ADHD. That has to be done by a medical professional. My professional expertise is in education, and then my personal expertise is in living with ADHD and parenting kids with ADHD, and just my work in the mental health field. But I think that and I do recommend that everybody do talk to your doctor if you suspect you have ADHD. That's something that you should do. You need to be monitored by a medical professional. The space that we are taking up here at our, Wonder Woman weekend retreat is a space where we can share our journeys together, and start to live a life that's more full, more exciting, because together is better. Basically, it just is. So I hope you'll tune in tomorrow evening, for some more news about the Wonder Woman retreat. And do check it out at www.mindstudio.ca/weekend. If this isn't for you, but you think you know someone who might be, forward it on to them, because it can be such a powerful thing to find a community who gets you. And so I'm hoping to find all my tribe, all my sisterhood out there, and maybe that's you, maybe it's someone you know. Well, goodbye for tonight, and I'll see you again sometime soon. Well, tomorrow, hopefully. Bye, everyone.